Today's Chab Shvat, story with the REBBITZIN, who was the master of this, the master of nuance and empathy and insightfulness. Stories of my own family, which I've shared before, so I won't share again now. My mother used to visit, my Zayda would visit the REBBITZIN. Here is a story. It's somewhat well known. I don't know if you know it, but we'll share it here. This is a wonderful little book that I picked up in Crown Heights. A collection of interviews and a collection of stories about the REBBITZIN and the history of life. So, Chesed Halberstam. What does Chesed stand for? Hananya, what his name is. It's called him Chesed. You know Chaim, his name is? Who knows? Chanoich, something, whatever. So he and his brother, his older brother, too, as we well know, Chaim Baruch, dear friend of the MTC. So they worked in the Rebbe's house as bocher. You had to be a certain kind of personality to work in the Rebbe's house, a unique kind of personality. He relates, this incident already occurred in 5747, this is 86, 87, the year before the REBBITZIN's Istalkus. She was already weak and she suffered from several ailments. Almost every day I used to drive her somewhere. I meant a different story, but I'll talk about this. So she could get out and breathe some fresh air. Once the Rebbe specifically asked me to see that the REBBITZIN should get out of the house as much as possible. One place which the REBBITZIN was particularly fond was a picturesque riverbank in Long Island. It was bathed in greenery with the most pleasant and tranquil atmosphere. We often went there, and the REBBITZIN used to sit on a bench by the riverbank, imbibing the pure air and enjoying the tranquility. Once as we drove along one of the roads we always took to get there, we encountered a sign indicating a road detour. We turned onto the alternate route. On the way, I noticed a police car parked outside the house. Close by was a moving van, and in the front yard of the house stood pieces of furniture and household items. My eyes absorbed all of this in passing, says Chesed Halberstam, and I attached no special significance to it. After all, in New York, hundreds of people move in and out of homes every day. Nor did the police car parked there strike me as being significant in any way or in any way connected with the movers. As we drove a few yards further, the REBBITZIN politely asked if we could drive back to the place where we had seen the police car and the moving van. I asked why she wanted to return there. She looked at me for a few moments as if choosing her words and said, my father, meaning the Frierdiker Rebbe, said the REBBITZIN, taught me that everything happens by Hashgacha Pratis. When I was young, she continued, my father once took me for a walk in a park and we sat down on a bench. My father spoke to me about Hashgacha Pratis, that whenever we see anything different from usual, it has happened by Hashgacha Pratis. Today, when we came to the lights and saw the sign about the detour, my father's words suddenly came to me. I thought, whenever we drive this way, there's no roadblock, no road work or detour. Just today there is. Since we had to take this other road, let's see what's happening there. When we drove back, so she says, please go back. We drove back and we saw that a small crowd of neighbors and curious folks had gathered in front of the house. They told us a Russian Jewish immigrant family was in the process of being evicted from their home for failure to pay 7 months rent. The landlord had brought marshals to enforce the court's eviction order. The unfortunate couple stood close by with their children, all of them in tears. I was curious to see the REBBITZIN's reaction. Now that we had learned it was no straightforward matter, it involved a large sum of money, a furious landlord, and a court case, there was no reason not to continue on our way. But the REBBITZIN saw differently. She asked me to approach the overseer in charge of the eviction and asked how much money the family owed. When I asked, he looked up and suddenly, suspiciously, looked me up and down, suspiciously, as if to say, who on earth are you? He must have realized I wasn't just trying to bother him because he did name the exact figure, which was a few $1,000s. returned to the car with the information. REBBITZIN Chaim Mushka didn't think twice. She took out her personal checkbook and wrote out a check for the full amount. She handed it to me, telling me that before giving it to the overseer, I should make sure that the family, that neither the family nor the neighbors notice what I am doing, so as to avoid causing the family any further embarrassment or bewilderment. When I gave the check to the overseer, he looked utterly stupefied. He first stared back and forth several times from the check to me, unable to say a word. He seemed unable to decide whether this was really happening or perhaps it was a dream. Never in his life had he encountered such a phenomenon that someone just passing by pays a debt for a stranger. But the check looked real, and eventually he pocketed it. A few moments later, the workers stopped carrying out the furniture, stood in the huddle for a while with the overseer, and then with a perplexed look on their faces, started carrying everything back inside. The family was told they could go back into their home. They were speechless. When they heard that an anonymous benefactor had paid their rent for them, their faces lit up with joy. The REBBITZIN asked me to drive quickly away before we could start getting curious stares, as we didn't see what happened later. Certainly, however, the family had never imagined the identity of their anonymous benefactor who had come to save them like an angel from heaven. Nor could they have known what had impelled her to go back to see them was her sensing the divine hand of Hashgacha Pratis. It was another story. It's a longer story, and it's one I wanted to tell you about. The REBBITZIN visiting a Holocaust survivor in the hospital who had survived the war but was childless and was sinking into depression, and she would visit her every day, bringing her hot soup, and took pains to make sure that this woman never knew that it was her, not to embarrass her. And that's a beautiful story, as there are many in recording this wonderful little book. Friends, have a wonderful day. Today's Chod Beishvat. Do something.
I will post the Mishnayos for all those that want to say Mishnayos.
Good. Good.
For the REBBITZIN.
Okay.
Shikoach, Rabbi, the neshama of the REBBITZIN should have an aliyah, and there should be a long life for all those who live in her footsteps with God's help. God bless you all.
Amen. Amen.